Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm super excited because we're going to get to talk about something that you guys have been asking about. I've noticed that in my questions that a lot of you have asked about one particular thing. How do I plan my travels? So I thought today we could talk a little bit about that because there are a few things that you probably know, and then there are a few things that you have no idea. And those are the things that I'm going to fill in the blanks for you with today. So starting off, how do I plan my travels? Well, the simple answer is I usually don't do too much planning, but it hasn't always been that way. So let me walk you through my process as to how I started out and why I'm kind of here now, and then where I do make a few little concessions back to that old style of travel planning. First off, for those of you who are new, hi, I'm Bunny. I've been on the road for about 8 years altogether almost, and it has been a wild ride. I started out tent camping, and then I started doing van life, and along the way I've learned a lot of things that can help you out. And so I'm hoping that through this video you can understand a little bit more about the process of travel and planning, and how you can also give yourself grace on the road. Now, when I first started out, I wanted to know exactly where I was going to be every single night because I was in a tent and it was a brand new thing. So I needed to know which campsites I was staying at. And at the time, that was a process that I mapped out, and I had a big map, and I would do little dots, and then I would also write down every single attraction that was in those areas. For example, if I was going to the Grand Canyon, I wanted to know where I was going to stay. I wanted to know how many hours it was going to take to get there from my last stop. I needed to know what things I was planning on doing at the Grand Canyon and everything in between. And because of that, it allowed me to have a really good plan going into travel that allowed me to kind of figure out who I wanted to be in the travel space. But then I started to notice that along the way, I felt like if I saw something that I really wanted to go see, my schedule was so regimented, it didn't allow me that spin-off to go squirrel syndrome over here and figure it out. So I noticed that I needed to give myself a little bit more flexibility. Now, I must say that flexibility is easier said than done. Whenever you're used to needing to regiment things, walking away from that model is super, super hard. It can be a little scary. It can also lead you into the what ifs. And if you're just starting out, the what ifs can be super overwhelming. So I gave myself time to allow myself to sink into this new travel style. And over time, what I would do instead of planning every single part is I might find campgrounds that I was interested in a blanket area, and then give myself the option for if I make it to this area, I could stay here. If I make it here, I could stay here, and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, the camping aspect was the hardest part when it came to tent camping, because unlike when I'm in the van and I can just pull into like a Walmart, tent camping, I could not do that. So I started to make that my priority and find one thing that I knew I needed to prioritize, and then I would just write down everything else that was around in those areas and see kind of what I could do. And then I started to kind of just knock off as many of those things as I possibly could when I was in a single area, because I'd already figured out where the hard thing was. And then I got real crazy with it. I started noticing how many things are out there that don't really allow you to plan. Those things that you don't see until you're already there. So I could be going, for example, along the coast of Oregon, and I knew ultimately there were some places that I could stay and some places that I couldn't stay, and that was all based on the criteria of me having a tent. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this and see if I can find places, because at one point I got into kind of a bad sort of way where I had planned a campsite only to pull in and be told that because I was in a tent, I couldn't stay. So it left me in this limbo of figuring out the details. And it was so nerve-wracking, but at the same time, it was a lesson. It was a lesson that I needed to make myself more flexible, because by being flexible, it allowed me to figure out that my path wasn't always just going to look exactly how I thought it was going to. Instead, it could look vastly different, and that's okay. And that conditioned me for all of the things that were going to be coming along with bad weather, campsites that were oversold, campsites that wouldn't allow tents, and every other possible scenario that you can think of. And so as I kind of loosened the grip on, okay, I have to have all this figured out, my life just started to get so much better. So I will say, I don't encourage you guys to start out with no plan. I encourage you to start off with a regimented plan that helps you feel comfortable in your space, especially when you're starting out. However, as you get used to the process, let go of the grip just a little bit. Allow yourself to see a brown sign and go down a road. Allow yourself to see an attraction and give yourself the grace to actually go investigate that attraction, because in all reality, we have one life. And if we're only in that area one time, that might be the only time that we get to see that thing. So give yourself a break. Now, there are a few resources that can make that break a little bit easier though. And when you're planning in the beginning stages, you can also use this particular set of resources. But as you go over time, you won't have to be like, okay, weeks in advance, here's my schedule. You could be like, oh, I'm in the area, let me see what's available. And you'll feel more confident in doing so. But again, I know that's kind of a thing you have to build into. So I definitely encourage you, if you're wanting to find non-primitive sites, to check out The Dirt. The Dirt is a great resource for finding non-primitive sites, as well as some primitive sites. But non-primitive sites, so sites with amenities when you're first starting out, they have so many. Not to mention, they have a lot of different hip camps that are available on there that kind of have some overlap with booking, so you can book directly through the site, and then you can feel assured that you have a site. They're also great for pulling up when you're in a pinch. If you're on the road and you're looking for something but might not be as aware of an area, you can pull up the maps, you can zoom them in and out, you can see all of the campsites in your area, and you can find out how much they cost, what amenities they have, if they cost anything, and then kind of what the restrictions are in those areas. The Dirt has always been and will always be one of my premier sources for finding campsites, especially improved campsites. Now, if you're looking for more boondocking style sites, iOverlander. iOverlander is the best thing that you can use for finding more primitive sites. And the reason why is because there are a lot of people who do exactly what we do in the vans. They pull into a campsite, they review the campsite, they tell you if it's big, if it's small, if you need a 4-wheel drive to get there. They tell you if they have any kind of services, if they have any things that you need to know about the area, if they had a good stay or a bad stay. Very similar to The Dirt. These are user-generated reviews, so they give you a very good idea as to what is going on. The thing I like about iOverlander also is it doesn't just tell you about campsites, it tells you where you can get water, where you can find showers, where you can dump trash, where you can do laundry, things like that. So this is super handy for the everyday nomad who is traveling around, whether you're in a tent or in a van. Now, one of the things that I will say is whenever I was using this, whenever I was in a tent, some of the sites did not have tent-specific user reviews, and because of that, I ended up in some places that I probably shouldn't have been in a tent that were bear territory, and I know that now, looking back. But at the time, I was blissfully ignorant, so if possible, kind of read the reviews, but also kind of compare maps from the National Forest Service if you're in a national forest, or restrictions and rules in those areas. Just kind of do the due diligence. This is where I would say if you're in a tent, do extra planning. If you're in a van, a lot of times super user friendly, pull in, go to bed, you're good. Another one that I would recommend is freecampsites.net. Now, this is a website, and it does show you a lot of places that you can boondock. These are going to be more like parking lots and things like that. There are a few campsites, however, that I have found on freecampsites.net that are beautiful campsites that are not just like a parking lot structure. They're actual campsites. So don't forget about freecampsites.net. It is a good resource. There's a lot of up-to-date reviews on there. And also, a lot of people put pictures on all three of these, so you can figure out if this is kind of the vibe that you're looking for, or if you would like to stay away. And that is a very good resource. So freecampsites.net. Now, I told you guys that I used to regiment. Super regiment. I would draw out a map, I would have dots, I would have lists, I would do the most. But then I loosened up a little bit. But there are still a few times whenever I do very much so deep dive into the logistics of a map and where I need to be and when I don't. And that is whenever I'm traveling during a season that I know is going to have some issues. For example, I am currently in fire season. Fire season is really kind of a scary time for a lot of us because as we're recreating, you could be at a campsite and like that, your campsite could be surrounded by fire or encroached upon by fire. And so you need to be able to have options, lots of options, and you also need to be aware of your area that you're going to be in. So in these situations, I have two recommendations for you. These recommendations could be the difference between you having a positive camping experience and a negative one. The first one is good old Google Maps. Download the Google app onto your phone, and there is a variety of different ways that you can use this. You can use it for driving directions, you can use it to pull out and to get an offline map of a specific area, and you can use various features that pop down in a little drop-down menu that allow you to do some insane things, such as checking the wind speeds in areas, checking the fire in areas, and other items like that. I definitely encourage you to do this because Google has literally saved me from going into some really bad areas. It also gives you the smoke bubble. The smoke bubble is going to be twofold. They have a light gray and a dark gray, and inside the light gray, that is where your unhealthy air quality begins, but you're not in the super danger zone. Then there's the dark gray area, which is basically like it is going to be real hard to breathe if you are in a sensitive group. For example, if you have asthma, I wouldn't go into a dark area. If you have long COVID, I would not go into a dark area. If you have a lot of allergy issues, don't go into one of the dark gray areas. And all of this can be seen as a result of good old Google. But then you also need to be looking at Watch Duty. Watch Duty is another app that I have been using over time that allows you to see a lot of information about the fires. Now on Google, one thing that I will say is you can click on the fire and it pops up a little bit of information about the containment and how many acres. But other than that, it's a little bit more limited on what details it provides. Watch Duty goes a little bit more into depth with this. So if you consult the two together, you can see a better overall outlook of what it is from two different resources. And I always, in weather-related situations, encourage you to check out more than one resource. If you see something on a news app, go and cross-check it with something else so that you can have the full story. And that way you can kind of get a better idea as to what's safe and what's not safe. Same thing with really bad torrential downpours that can lead to flooding. I encourage you guys to check into different resources for those based on your area that you're in. And unfortunately, they don't have a database of flooding that I am aware of. I haven't been able to find one, but if you have one, please leave it below and I will share it with everyone so that they can have this resource as well. Now let's talk about tornadoes. Tornadoes are terrifying. Tornadoes come out of nowhere and sometimes they don't give you a lot of warning. So having resources that you can watch that are national as well as local in an area. I always encourage you to, if you are going to an area, figure out what radio station comes in whenever you come into that community. Also, see if they do have any news sources in that area that you can just quickly Google and find so that you can get the most up-to-date information. This is good for a variety of different reasons, but definitely when it comes to the weather. I also very highly recommend two resources to you, Max Velocity and Ryan Hall, y'all. Both of them do national news coverage of really bad weather that's going on. They will tell you if you are in harm's way when it comes to tornadoes. They will tell you where the path is, and they do a lot of live streams to help you kind of figure that out really rapidly. I have turned to both of those living in Texas, and they have been instrumental, but I know a lot of other people who live in other states who also look at both of these resources and find them to be so life-changing, because literally in an instance you could be in a really bad situation. I have been caught in the path of a tornado before and it was terrifying. Moral of the story, 10 out of 10, do not recommend. Not fun. So definitely be proactive in things like that. So anything that has to do with bad weather, fires, things like that, plan. Give yourself a few exit strategies. When you're pulling up your map, look at all of the offshoots of the roads. Use Google to not only establish if there's fires or any kind of other kind of weirdness, but cross-check it to these other places, and then pull up your Google again and zoom out, see the entire area that you are currently in as well as the area you're wanting to go to, and make sure you have an offline map for both of those so you can know every single road in those regions, and that way you can get out of there even if you don't have service. Another thing that I always will recommend that seems kind of antiquated to most people is get some paper maps. Paper maps could be the difference between you finding a tiny little forest road and you missing that forest road and being stuck in a really bad scenario. So again, how do I personally plan travel? I give myself grace. I allow myself to see as much as I possibly can. I don't define myself by a time frame. I allow myself to have flexibility of movement, and sometimes that works out and sometimes that's challenging. But I always try to give myself a few options when it comes to anything that could be dangerous. And I think that that's the most important part. You can plan and pick out your route to a location, and along the way have all the attractions written down, and just give yourself like ability to see all of those things. But if you don't see those things, also don't beat yourself up. If something doesn't work out, just move on to the next thing and have a good time. And then also remember, again, to continue to check those other things with the safety in mind, because even though we can be more flexible in how we find our campsites, or we can be more flexible in which attractions we choose to go to, or where we choose to buy our groceries, we don't want to be lax when it comes to the safety aspect. So I hope this is helpful. I know this probably doesn't answer your question to the fullest extent, because honestly, I don't do a ton of planning. I don't do a ton of research anymore. I basically do general Google searches of an area, and then I kind of modify as I go. But at the same time, there are those things that even after 7.5, almost 8 years of travel, that I consistently am looking into. I know what kind of equipment that I have. I know what that equipment is capable of doing. For example, with me being in the van, I know that I am considered to be hard sides, so I can sleep in bear country now. When I was in the tent, I could not, so that required more planning in order for me to say certain things. Now, I don't have to worry about that as much. And I think that as you get more familiar with your vehicle, you start to learn those kinds of things. Or as you get more familiar with your travel style, you'll start to not feel like you have to have everything written down in stone. You'll allow yourself to say, today I'm not feeling as good. I want to hang out. Or today I want to go on more adventures. Or today I just kind of want to play it by ear and see where the signs take me. And you'll feel more comfortable doing that. So remember, guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. I'm about to get off to my next adventure. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.